With 113 days to go until the general election, today was supposed to kick off the four-day Democratic National Convention in Milwaukee. Instead, presumptive nominee Joe Biden is spending the day attending virtual finance events. New CBS News Battleground Tracker polls show him gaining in a number of key battleground states. President Trump held a public roundtable at the White House with people who say they have been positively impacted by law enforcement. The president used the event to offer a bleak assessment of cities dealing with rising violent crime. Over the weekend, President Trump was photographed wearing a mask for the first time after resisting it for months. It's a visual reminder of the coronavirus's impact on this election. CBS News' latest Battleground Tracker poll finds a reshaped race in 3 key states President Trump won in 2016. Joe Biden is now leading by 6 points in Florida, which has voted for the winner in every election this millennium. The two are tied in Arizona and competitive in Texas, which has voted Republican in every election since 1976. In all 3 of those states, at least 60% of registered voters feel their states have moved too quickly to reopen during the pandemic. Those states have all seen record high COVID-19 deaths in the past week. The good news for President Trump, though, is that when you ask voters about his handling specifically, feelings are more mixed, with smaller majorities saying he's doing a bad job. At the White House today, President Trump attacked the poll's findings.
We think we're doing very well. We had some poll numbers a little while ago that are great. You know, it's the same story. It's suppression polls that we had in 2016, phony polls, fake news, phony polls, same thing. And we're doing very well. We're doing well in Georgia. We're doing well in Texas. I've read where I was 1 point up in Texas. I'm not 1 point up in Texas. We're many points up.
CBS News Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins me now to break down the poll numbers. Anthony, great to see you. So when you dig into the crosstabs of this data, among which groups is Joe Biden seeing the most gains?
The first answer is we look at Hispanic voters, where Joe Biden is performing about as well or even a little bit better in some of these states. That is a critical voting bloc for Democrats. But then you move past that and you look at seniors. Well, seniors have been a very reliably Republican group in all of these states, and the president is still leading with them, but Joe Biden appears to have cut into the president's margins with them. So, for example, you see Donald Trump, who got 57% of the senior vote in Florida back in 2016, he's down to 50% now. That's still a good margin, but it might not be good enough, certainly not good enough at the moment for him to be in the lead in that state. One of the things that we see associated with this, Tanya, is views on COVID and handling of COVID that you mentioned there at the top. Well, Joe Biden also has a lead among people because they think he does better at caring about people's risk of getting coronavirus. And so that's one important factor. And then the last one I would mention is white women who have college degrees. This is a demographic group that Democrats have been courting and increasingly doing well with. We saw that a lot in the midterms, and that upward trend continues for Democrats in these states. It's a large voting bloc. Joe Biden registering double-digit gains with that group compared to how Democrats did in 2016. And so that's another key that's helping to reshape this race, Tanya.
So interesting. All right, so Anthony, you actually have data from all 50 states, which gives us a pretty comprehensive view of the entire state of the race at this time. What did you find?
Well, that's what the Battleground Tracker as its overall project is really all about. You remember, we keep reminding people that this is a 50-state race. The Electoral College is what decides the president. You will see many polls that have national findings. That's nice. It's good context. But you want to be able to look at every single state. Now, some we've focused on right now, like I mentioned, Arizona, Florida, Texas. But what we've been doing over the course of interviewing people nationally for these last few weeks is we gather that data And then in every single state, we know how many types of voters there are of each demographic group. We know how many types of voters based on their attitudes towards the candidates. And you can sum that up and get an estimate from every state. Now, that's a quick snapshot look at where the race stands. And the big takeaway picture from that is that at the moment, Joe Biden's national lead and state-by-state lead would translate into an electoral college lead. Maybe that's not a big surprise because you do see him leading in these polls. It's not enough at this moment to say that any one of these candidates is for sure going to win, and I urge caution there.
Right.
This is July. This is where it stands at the moment. But that's really what the tracker is all about, is about giving those estimates from every state and reminding people that this is, in fact, a 50-state race.
Right. And of course, on top of the presidential race, your team examined 2 Senate seats Democrats are hoping to flip. How do those seats look? What did you find there?
Well, one in Arizona that I think the Democrats, from all we hear, really have their eyes on is the one in Arizona. And we find the Democrats up in that state. Mark Kelly up in that race. He's running obviously a little bit ahead of Joe Biden there in our polling. But then in Texas, that's a bit of a higher hill for Democrats to climb there. You know, what we really see there is the Democrats and Texas, this goes really more generally, is the Democrats have their eyes on that state. They're hoping that change among, as I said, college degree holding voters, among women, certainly among the Hispanic vote, will help them flip it. You remember back in the midterms in 2018 where Beto O'Rourke was vying for that Senate seat and fell short. You know, that same thing appears to be happening, at least in this case right now, for that Senate seat. But, you know, again, Texas may be a tough one for Democrats to pick up, but it's certainly in contention right now. And the broader Senate map, Tanya, is one that if Joe Biden were to do very well, then the Democrats would certainly hope that he has coattails enough to flip some of these Senate seats and maybe be able to take back the Senate for the Democrats as well.
All right. Lots of interesting stuff there. Anthony Salvanto, thank you so much.
Welcome.
And for more on all this, I want to bring in Ed O'Keefe and Marc Caputo. Ed is a CBS News political correspondent. Marc is a reporter for Politico covering the 2020 election and the state of Florida. Ed, let me start with you. How different does this race look compared to just a few months ago? And what factors in the immediate future could impact it going forward?
I think the fact, Tanya, that you would even think to do polls in these 3 Sunbelt states with the idea that Joe Biden could be leading or tied in all 3 is testament to the change. And it has everything to do, well, not everything, but it has a lot to do. A large part of this has to do with the pandemic and the economic fallout and the concerns about the president's management of it all. So, you know, the fact that he's leading by 6 in Florida, which, you know, is a number that will change and likely contract. Mark can tell us better about that. The fact that he's, you know, essentially tied with the president in Texas and tied with the president statistically in Arizona is a sign that things are going quite well for them. You talk to Democrats, especially you talk to Biden campaign officials, and Mark can tell you this too, they are most bullish about Arizona being a state that they can pick up. Florida would be great, but they are working around Florida in the event that it swings back to the president. The one that top management in the Biden campaign really dreams about is Arizona, for all the reasons the poll shows us. He's doing well among Latinos, he's doing better among seniors, and he's doing well among women in all 3 of these states. And if he can do well there and do better than Hillary Clinton did in those states, it's likely enough to get him a win. But I thought that the other stunning stat is that in all 3 states, more than 6 in 10 say that they believe their state reopened too soon. Yeah. And the fact that many of them say it's because of pressure from the White House to do so. So that's a double-barrel blame on the president then. Poorly mishandling this whole situation and then trying to do a rush job on reopening.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of to exactly that point, Mark, 68% of Floridians think exactly what Ed just said, that the state is reopening too quickly and the government did so because of pressure from the Trump administration. 68%. So, Mark, you know, could that continue to backfire for the president?
Well, certainly. One of the problems that Donald Trump has had with the pandemic is that his skill set does not fit the moment. And you can't have a president constantly discount the effects and the danger of a pandemic virus and then try to kind of will an economy to open when people are getting infected, getting sick, getting hospitalized, and dying. And that's happening. And we've seen it in Florida is we flattened the curve. We had a reduction in infection rates. We had a reduction in deaths and in hospitalizations. And then we opened. And as the rate of infection started to climb, and as the cases started to increase, the leader of Florida, the governor, Ron DeSantis, kept trying to say, oh, well, yeah, sure, the cases are up, but the testing's up. And then we said, well, the positivity's rising, which means infection is spreading. And then he had some explanations for that. And then they said, well, the hospitalizations aren't really increasing. Now the hospitalizations started to increase. And then they said, well, the deaths aren't really increasing. Well, now the deaths are increasing, and the cases are increasing, and the hospitalizations are increasing. And we don't really see a lot of signs of this stopping right now. And if that continues on,
Marc,
the scars that could bear for the president aren't going to be very good.
Right. So, Marc, quickly sticking with Florida, as you know, President Trump and the Republican Party are still planning for that in-person convention up the coast from you in Jacksonville. And as we've been talking about, you know, these record high numbers of infections almost daily out of Florida. You know, is the Republican Party concerned about this? What needs to happen in order for the convention to be totally greenlit? And isn't there the worry that many attendees will simply choose to sit this one out rather than risk exposure to the virus?
Yeah, I think that worry is there. The question is how many people are going to be able to have in the arena? Right now, under current rules, you can only have 50% occupancy in indoor events. That would be about 7,500 people. Can the Republican Party in the United States find 7,500 diehard loyalists of the president to fill? Yes. Can they do it safely? That's a bigger question. They're going to probably have to do social distancing. Well, they are. They're going to have to wear masks, and they're going to have to be careful and follow good safety protocols. Will they do that? And what are those protocols? We don't know. We're going to find it.
Right. Okay. So, Ed, how is the White House, how is the Trump administration trying to spin things or make it look as if the president has a handle on the virus?
And I would just add to Marc's list of questions about can they find 7,500 people who want to hang out in Jacksonville in August? It is a hot time of year, with apologies to our friends in Northeast Florida. Not for nothing, that's going to be a challenge as well. As for the White House, look, the president held this event today at the White House, as you mentioned, about or with people who have had a positive experience with law enforcement. In essence, he's trying to change the subject or try to move on. And while he has at times addressed this, he gets asked about it when he does take questions from reporters, it's clear that he's not spending every waking moment of his day worrying about this. In some ways he can't. In some ways his critics would argue he should. Wednesday he's going to Atlanta, or at least he's scheduled to talk about infrastructure and the economy, trying to talk about an issue that, frankly, Joe Biden has spent now considerable amount of time in the last few days focused on. And if you look at the poll, the economy is the one place where the president continues to have an advantage, and the economy remains issue number one for voters, in part because Republicans see that as such a big concern, restarting the economy, making sure that things are okay from an economic perspective. So that may be one way that the president tries to sort of get beyond this or try to deal with it, is to talk about the fact that he believes the economy can rebound pretty quickly and that he is the guy best equipped to do that. Reams of polls in recent months suggest that voters think he is. But Biden will be speaking tomorrow in Delaware on this subject, economic rebirth, and will be focused primarily on creating energy jobs, issues regarding labor unions, and workers' rights. Part two of what we're told is at least a four-part series of speeches on the economy designed to cut into the president's advantage. And if the president can't come up with anything else besides his advantage in the economy, he's going to be in real trouble as this progresses.
All right. Well, Ed O'Keefe and Marc Caputo, thanks to both of you so much. We appreciate it.